Okay, so we are ready to kick off another Tanya Tuesday today. Today being the second day of the month of Elul. I should have brought my shofar here, but technically you have to hear the shofar in person. So if you have a shofar at home, make sure you blow it. We blow it the entire month except for the last day. We also say an extra psalm every single day, Psalm 27, in our morning and afternoon prayers, as well as in the month of Elul, we say 3 chapters of Psalms. If you want to know more about the month of Elul, look up my master class that I gave on Elul last week. If you want to know more about Rosh Hashanah, come to my master class on Rosh Hashanah. That is going to be tomorrow night at 7:30 p.m. But today we are doing Tanya, and we have a most fascinating topic ahead of us. A topic that makes the world go round, topic that makes people do all types of things, and that is going to be, any thoughts? Money. Money. It's going to be money. We're going to talk about money in this class. Um, so let's summarize what we've been doing now. We've been discussing in these chapters 35, 36, 37, what does God want from the creation of this world? And our answer is, of course, God wants a home here on this earth. Now, of course, God doesn't take up any space, so God doesn't need a home, right? Only people that take up space need a home. So what does it mean God needs a home down here? It means God wants a home. And what does it mean he wants a home? He wants a place where he wants to be in this world, which naturally does not show God, and he wants to be revealed in this earth. And the last couple of weeks we've discussed, so that is why we have Torah, we have mitzvos, to bring godliness into all different parts of the world. And each and every single one of us has a certain portion in the world that we need to elevate. And collectively, when the Jewish people through all the generations have elevated and connected all parts of this world to God, then at that moment, we will have elevated this world. So that also, by the way, gives a really great explanation as to, people wonder, how could the Mashiach come when the world looks so bad? The answer is that it doesn't really matter, because what we're trying to do is we're trying to connect every single part of this world with God. And over the thousands of years, we've done most of it. So we're just trying to find the last couple items. Let's say, imagine you're working on a project and you're not the most skilled construction person, but this project is near completion and you just have to do the last part. You got to paint the walls and you got to change the light bulbs, let's say, right? So you don't need specialists, okay? That's the same idea here as we could say about the Mashiach, is we can understand how Mashiach can still come even though the world looks like a very dark place, because most of the world has already, its vitality and life force has already changed. In other words, we discussed last week, what we do is, when we do a mitzvah with certain elements of this world, we're changing what is vivifying it. So before it was getting its power from Klipat Noga, now it's getting its power from the holy side. But of course, as I said last time, truthfully, the world won't light up with that revelation until we do it all. It's like completing a circuit. So once we've connected throughout all the generations, every single element of the world to the holiness, then the entire world will shift its energy, and its energy will shift to, we're in chapter 37, by the way, and the world will be in section 5 in chapter 37. The world will shift its energy to being entirely holy. And that is why when Mashiach comes, there's so many things will change in the world, because the world's energy, what vivifies the world, will be a different energy. And that's also why we can explain why right now evil is putting up such a big fight, because evil is in its last throes. It's putting up that terrific fight because it sees how its energy is about to be cut off. It sees how soon the Mashiach is going to come, because almost all the circuits, almost all the wiring has been placed. The circuit's almost complete. It sees how it's going to lose its hold and its power. And so, in fact, if anything, the darkness of exile is actually a sign of how close that we are to the Mashiach. Now, that is going to be a beautiful segue into this chapter, because again, the whole idea was we need to connect every single element of this world to godliness. And what mitzvah that we can do that creates the largest connection to godliness, as we're going to explain, is going to be charity. Charity is what's going to charity is going to really change that, okay? Because charity, as we'll see, really is everywhere in life. This is the funny thing, but let's go back before we get to charity. Let's talk about money, because charity is really just a certain way to use your money. So let's talk about money for a second. Money is, on the one hand, is like the most important thing in life. Everybody spends their life trying to make money and spend their money. And so money is so fascinating. It's on the one hand like the most important thing, what makes the world go round. At the same time, it's the least important thing. It's actually just a tool. It doesn't really, it's nothing. Money in itself is actually nothing, right? The old saying is, money can't buy happiness, but it sure can help. And that really expresses this idea, to the greatest extent. In other words, money in itself is not meaningful, but it's what money represents and what money can accomplish that makes money meaningful. And that's really going to be what we're going to explore today, is as we realize how important money is in our lives and how much of our lives we spend on money, it follows, therefore, if we do a mitzvah with money, spend a lot of our lives around money. And therefore, if we can elevate our money, we have elevated a large part of our lives. And why is that important? Because again, if our goal is to create a home for God here on this earth, then reaching more areas of this earth is going to make a home for God in more places. And I want to take this one step further. I was listening to someone today, he said a very interesting insight. He said, what really changed at the giving of the Torah? There's a lot of different things, but one thing is this idea that God chose to connect with a nation. In other words, until then, God connected with individuals. Abraham, Sarah, Isaac, Rebecca, Jacob, Leah, Rachel, Joseph, until Noah, Adam and Eve, until that point, so to speak, God was more connected and, so to speak, was giving a commandment to a nation. He was telling the nation what he wanted. Individuals can be righteous. Abraham can be righteous. Sarah is righteous, okay? So when God chooses to work with individuals, that means God is saying, I want righteous individuals. But when God chooses to give to a nation, automatically when you have a crowd of people, there's going to be great people and not such great people. So when God gave the Torah to a nation, that means he was saying, I now want everyone. Knowing all our flaws, knowing all our issues, God wanted to connect with us. And why would that be? The answer is because God wants to be able to reach all corners of the earth. If he's just going to deal with an Abraham, if he's just going to deal with a Moses, he's not going to reach every element of this world, because those are holy people, live in a holy lifestyle. If he wants to reach every single element of the earth, he can't just work, quote unquote, with the rabbis, okay? He's got to work with everybody. And so that's what was monumental about the giving of the Torah. That's kind of what we discussed last week, how this was the mission given to all the Jewish souls. So the same thing I could say is this week. Money is a great expression of this, because money, again, is an expression of how God is very difficult. And it takes up, so to speak, our entire lives. And when we expend so much energy on it, when we give charity, we are actually elevating all parts of our lives, and thereby creating a home for God in many, many different areas of our life. So with that said, let us take a look inside the text. So if you have the practical Tanya, it will be charity. And he says like this, page 423, section 5, chapter 36. The above means this idea that, one second, based on the above, that our the physical world right? And thereby bring God home throughout the entire physical world, and every single soul has their section of the world to reach to. Based on the above, we can appreciate why the sages praise the virtue of charity to a very great extent. Now, you might think the rabbis praise charity because they're fundraisers, but the truth is they were not. In fact, if you look in the Talmud, many of the Talmudic sages did not fundraise. They actually worked. Okay. Unfortunately, in today's day and age, uh, we don't have the brains that they did, and therefore it's very, very difficult for most rabbis to also work. Okay, because to have that ability to both pull a full-time job and put in the amount of study that you need to be a rabbi is very hard. Therefore, that's one reason it's changed. But what I'm trying to get to is I just wanting to understand historically. In other words, there's one thing if you hear me talking about giving charity, right? Because I have to fundraise as well, right? Talking about sages that did not need to fundraise. They so obviously some did go fundraising for the yeshivas, whatever, but many did not. Many were sages. They worked and they didn't need anybody else's money. And the Talmud even describes how many of them lived a very poor life and they didn't care. So why would they talk about charity? It obviously is because charity is very important, not because they needed money. So again, based on the above, we can appreciate why the sages praise the virtue of charity to a very great extent, saying that is equivalent to all other mitzvahs put together. Okay, so they say charity is equivalent to all other mitzvahs. And across the Jerusalem Talmud is simply called the mitzvah. So can you imagine? If I were to say, did you do the mitzvah today? What mitzvah am I referring to? Is it tefillin? Is it kosher? What mitzvah am I referring to? Is it prayer? No. I would be referring to charity. Why charity? Since it is normal to refer to charity simply as the mitzvah, it's because it's the most significant of all the practical mitzvahs and it surpasses them all. In other words, if we understand mitzvahs the way we've explained it till now, that the purpose of a mitzvah is to bring godliness into this world, then the mitzvah that will do that the most will be the mitzvah. It follows very logically, right? So let's continue. For as we have seen, the purpose of all the mitzvos is only to elevate the energizing animal soul to God, being that the animal soul is the active force that powers their observance, and it's the animal soul that becomes immersed in their observance, resulting in the animal soul being absorbed in the blessed infinite light, which is dressed in the mitzvos. I don't know why he's not focusing also on the fact that you're elevating the world around you, but anyways, this is what we've said till now. We've said, and I'm sorry I skipped it in my summary, but we said that when you do a mitzvah, you're elevating both the animal soul, which is vivified by the klipat noga, as well as the world around you, which is also animated by the klipat noga. So, but here he's focusing on your animal soul. So, when you do a mitzvah, you're elevating your animal soul because the animal soul has to animate your mitzvah. Okay. And let's continue. And you have no mitzvah through which the energizing animal soul is immersed to a greater extent than the mitzvah of charity. Why? Because there's other mitzvahs which momentarily engage just one part of the body. Only one component of the energizing soul is immersed in them. In other words, if I do a mitzvah with a lulav and etrog, I am elevating the lulav and etrog. Now, we did explain earlier that, oh, sure, when you elevate the lulav and etrog, you're elevating the money you use to buy it, and you're elevating along the way all of the people that were involved in creating that. The charity is much more direct. Charity is that the money itself is becoming a mitzvah, and all of the effort that it took to get that money. Yeah, that's your entire lifeblood and your entire life force goes into that. Goes into making that money. So it's a much more direct elevation. Let's continue. And this is only at the moment when each mitzvah is observed. So again, every mitzvah only elevates a certain part of the animal soul that's immersed in that mitzvah. So for example, if I'm doing a little Venetorg, I'm elevating my hands, right? Maybe my lips as well. And I'm only elevating it at the moment I'm doing the mitzvah. But with charity, which a person gives the money earned through his hard work over an extended period of time, the result is that all the powers of his energizing animal soul that were immersed in manual labor or other activity by which he acquired the funds are elevated through the charitable donation. Now, by the way, my example of lulav and etrog is also not the other thing with the lulav etrog, by the way, is you buy it once and you use it for 7 days. So let's give another example. Tefillin, right? Tefillin, sure, when you bought it, there was a lot of money and all the energy that went into that is elevated. But from then on, you use it for 20 years. Use it for 20 years. You know, some mitzvahs you don't even buy. Charity is the only mitzvah that you have to buy, right? Tefillin, someone could gift you tefillin. Someone could gift you lulav and etrog, right? You have to actually give the charity. It has to be your money that you're giving to charity. Really yours, you know? It has to be your money that then you choose to give to charity. And so once it's yours, you have the choice. So what I'm getting to is charity is the only mitzvah that very much directly elevates our entire lives because, number one, it elevates a large part of our life. Requires you to actually spend money. So yes, technically some other mitzvahs can elevate some of the money that you've made, but they don't have to, and not to the extent of charity. And that is why charity is called the mitzvah. Any questions or comments? Nope. So let us continue in here. But with charity, which a person gives for the money earned through his hard work over an extended period of time, the result is that all the powers of his energizing soul, animal soul, which were immersed in the manual labor, other activity by which he acquired these funds, are elevated through the charitable donations. So all of his energizing animal soul is elevated to God, and not just one component of his soul, as is the case with other mitzvahs. So imagine you spend a lot of time marketing your product, then you spend a lot of time figuring out the financing, then you buy the product, and then you do the bookkeeping, and then so all of these elements that go into making that money are all elevated when you give charity. You give charity, they're all elevated. And this is a very important point here as well. All that hard work which you put into it is also elevated. Okay, now let's continue. So all of his energizing soul is elevated to God, and not to us. Now he says like this. However, this argument seems to make sense only if a person earned his money by working hard. What if he did it the old-fashioned Jewish way? He inherited it, or he won the lottery. Reminds me of the joke I said in Shul on Shabbos. One day, Sammy asks his wife, and he says, "Honey, would you love me even if I didn't inherit all that money from Dad?" And she says, "My dear husband, I would love you no matter who you inherited the money from." Okay, so the point is, there's a way to make money through inheritance or by winning the lottery. So let's say I got money, it's mine, but I didn't work hard on it. So it's not elevating, so to speak, any really part of my life. I got the money, then I spent it. So, the money came easy, it left easy, right? So how would that elevate different parts of our life? So here's going to make a fascinating example. Sorry, fascinating idea. Since you could have used the money for something else, therefore it's considered as if it's elevating all of your life. And this goes back to where we started. Remember we said that money on the one hand is everything and the money is on the other hand nothing, right? Money is the fuel for everything. We are not allowed to generate money. In fact, in America, I think you're not allowed to destroy money as well, right? Money is a very, very important thing. You're not allowed to waste your money in Judaism. It's forbidden, even if you have a lot of money. That's why there's one opinion. There's two opinions. One opinion says if you gamble, you are not allowed to be a kosher witness because you're just wasting money. So when we give away our money, we're giving away things that we could have used for whatever we wanted, right? So even if I never worked hard on that money, I am giving away, so to speak, my very life to the closest extent that I can, right? In other words, we can't actually give up our life for God, unless, of course, God forbid, you're placed to that test. So what other element of my life can I really give away my most, my all? And that's money, because money is what allows us to do pretty much everything we want to do. And so by giving away money, so to speak, that is the closest thing we can really give away, that gives away the most of us. And this is actually expressed in the prayer of the Shema. In the Shema, we say you should love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might, right? So you got to love God with all your heart, all your feelings. Then it takes it up a next step. You got to love God with all your soul. What does it mean to love God with all your soul? As Rashi says there, even if he takes your soul, right? Even if you have to give up your life for God, you should do that. And then it says with all of your might. And Rashi says there, what does all your might mean? Rashi says all your might means all your money. You have to love God with all your money. And so the commentaries say, what do you mean? This is a buildup. First says love God with all your heart, then love God with all your soul. How is money greater than giving away your soul to God? And the answer, as we said, is that there's many people who, if it would become to a test of faith, sure, they would give up their life for God. But on a day-to-day basis, would they give up their money for God? Not necessarily. As I say, a quote from Jack Benny, right? Jack Benny says, one time a guy was mugging him and says, your money or your life? And he says, I'm thinking. We have a funny relationship with money. Money is really very important. How many people have died for the sake of money, right? So money is very much integrated with deeply integrated with our lives. And so therefore, even if you didn't work on the money, once you own that money and you could have used it for anything, now that you're going to use it for charity, you have elevated your so to speak, your entire life. Let's take a look at the text inside. He says like this. He says, and even a person who doesn't work to earn his money, which means that he didn't immerse his animal soul into the activity, which earlier we made it sound like, oh, because you worked hard on it, therefore, because you had to work hard on it, therefore, when you give charity, you're elevating your entire life. But he says, no. He says, even a person didn't work hard to earn the money, which means he didn't immerse his animal soul into activity. Nevertheless, since this money could have been soul alive in his body, and by the way, that was the more exciting things back in Russia. Today we can add more things, and he could have bought the latest iPhone and the latest MacBook and a bunch of TV shows and movies and whatever. You know, we have more exciting ideas than just food and drink. So he continues, it follows that by giving away some of that money, he gives his life's soul to God. And therefore, and that's why our sages of blessed memory taught that charity brings close to final messianic redemption. And again, this goes back to what brings the Mashiach. When we change the life force of the world, that is what brings about the Mashiach, right? Mashiach is when we change the life force of the world to be a holy life force. We've been working on that for thousands of generations. How do we do that? By elevating different parts of our lives. What elevates the most of our lives is charity. And now we can understand why our sages say giving charity brings the redemption closer. That is why it's a big custom on fast days, especially to give charity. Because a fast day, all the fast days except for Yom Kippur are all about the destruction of the temple. So if we want to bring back the temple, we give charity. So it's a big custom on fast days to give extra charity. It's called the charity of the fast. Why? Because it brings the redemption closer. So why specifically charity more than anything else? Now we can understand, because charity elevates so much of our lives. So automatically it's going to bring the redemption closer. So that's what he says. And that is why our sages of blessed memory taught that charity brings closer the redemption, because through one act of charity, you elevate a lot of the energizing animal soul. Many powers and many components of the animal soul which you wouldn't have been able to elevate even with several other practical commandments. So, in other words, what would take you several other practical commandments, you can elevate very, very easily through charity. Okay, so that's why charity is considered the mitzvah, and it's the mitzvah that will bring the Mashiach, and it is the ultimate mitzvah that helps that helps make this world a home for God, which automatically means it's the mitzvah that that will bring the Mashiach closer. Okay, let us continue over here, and I'm gonna have to zoom out to go to the next page. So we'll go to page 424. 424. Okay. So now we're going to have a problem. Okay. Any questions about charity? Any questions about charity before we go on? Any questions? Okay. So hopefully you appreciate charity even more and you have an appreciation for it. And you will understand why charity is such a big mitzvah in Judaism, not just because so many great organizations need money, which is true as well, but there's such a power in giving. In fact, the Talmud tells a story that there's a story in the Talmud. A heretic asked one of the sages of the Talmud, and he said, "Why is it that God created some people poor, some people rich?" Right? God could have created everybody rich. God sustains the world. And the answer was, in order that there should be charity in the world. God wants that there should be charity in this earth. Now then you could ask the question, so why do I have to be the poor person, they be the rich person? This for another time, for another story. You can always ask more questions on God, because God ultimately is beyond our understanding. But the idea is that charity is this mitzvah that has such a powerful effect on the world that God wanted to make sure that there is charity throughout the world and everybody is able to give charity. With this in mind, Tanya is now going to ask a question based on what we've learned to now. So before we get to the question, usually I show the video at the end. I want to show the video now because we kind of ended this piece on the importance of giving charity and how it is the quintessential mitzvah. So I want to show this video here. Give me a second. But again, what we're walking away with today is, to summarize it, is that charity is the quintessential mitzvah to the point where the Talmud calls it the mitzvah, and it's also the mitzvah that brings God, that brings the Mashiach closer. Why? Because it is the mitzvah that elevates the most of our life, and even if we didn't earn it, even if we inherited it, charity is the thing that completely elevates all parts of our lives, because money makes the world go around. Money is what powers whatever we want to do in our life, and therefore, when we give charity, we're actually elevating all parts of our life. Okay. So with that, again, I said I'm going to show this video. Hope you don't mind me showing the video early. Yeah, you had a question, Dr. Yannick?
Yeah, so I have a question generally about charity.
Okay.
So let's say I'm going to come to Rosh Hashanah dinner with you.
Yeah.
And the shul, which I am. And you're charging $30 per person.
Right.
And I decide I'm going to give $100 a person or whatever. Is that considered charity even though we're receiving something for the money we're giving?
So charity is any time that it's not required of you to pay.
Right. So this has a requirement, $30 a person.
So right, you're asking is the 35 person. Right. So the $35 would not be considered charity, but the extra money would be considered charity.
Okay, it would be.
Where does that matter? So for example, let's say, like I do, okay, I track how much money I make and I make sure to give 10%, right? So let's say you go to the dinner, let's say it was $30 a person, let's say you're paying, it would cost you $60 and you're paying $100. you could then take the extra $40 you paid, and that will go towards the 10% that you need to give of your earnings. Okay, it is considered
That
charity.
would be considered charity, even though you're receiving something for that service, even though you're paying more than what is normally required of that service.
Correct. As long as it's not a charge. Okay. Give another example. A lot of parents send their kids to schools, right? Let's say the tuition in the school is $12,000, right? Now, a lot of schools have to fundraise additionally to that. Okay. If the parent chooses to give an extra $2,000, that is charity because they don't have to give that money, right? If the school forces them to give the money, then it can't be charity anymore, right?
Right.
But anytime you are not obligated to pay that money to get that service, then it's considered charity. It's a good question you're asking because just in general, the laws of charity are sometimes complex.
Yeah.
What can be considered charity? I'll just give you another example. There's a whole discussion if in general tuition can be considered charity. Why? I'll tell you a secret. It's funny, interesting thing. According to Jewish law, technically, once your child is over the age of 7, you're not halachically obligated to take care of them.
Now you tell me this, Rabbi.
Now I tell you
You
this. Exactly.
me
Now I
this.
tell you this. Okay. Yeah. But by the way, it wouldn't make it. I think that's the thing. By the way, but it wouldn't help. By the way, because as a community, we have an obligation to take care of all the children in town. So I don't know how much it would help us by not taking care of our own kids. Then, if everybody stopped taking care of their kids, we'd probably end up spending more money. We'd have to take care of everyone's kids. But technically, I believe in Jewish law. I don't know why after 7. I forget why. I have to look it up. After age 7 or something, you're not obligated to take care of them, and therefore some people say it could be considered charity. But anyways, there's a lot of discussions on this, and I haven't necessarily looked into it in depth yet because my tuition costs are not crazy yet. But technically, yeah. Also, when you pay tuition for a Jewish school, there's a discussion there because it's Torah study. Okay, when you're paying for a Rosh Hashanah dinner, it's a meal. It's gonna be different. So let's give another example. Let's say membership at a synagogue. Is membership at a synagogue considered charity? I think
It
the
is.
answer is yes, because you're not getting any tangible, quote unquote, physical benefits. And maybe you get a couple dollars off of, certain programs, but generally not, Um, as I write at the bottom of my tax receipts, no tangible benefits, only spiritual benefits or something. I think I write at the bottom of my receipts, right? No tangible goods were received, only spiritual benefits. So as long as the benefits are spiritual, and that means you are not obligated to pay it, it can be considered charity.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay. So since we're talking about charity, I want to show just a video for our weekly video. I want to show a video about charity, and I had a couple options, but I'm gonna go with this one because it's important. They're both good, but a couple stories. Here, let's do this one.
In the evolution of Chabad of the Valley, we faced seemingly insurmountable hardships. I remember one particular time things were very, very difficult, and a very special balabas, a very special lay leader, a supporter of our organization, came to see me, and I basically opened up my heart to him. I said, things are very, very tough, and I asked him for a ridiculously large amount of money. And he didn't flinch a muscle. He says, I'm into something very big right now, and if it works, you have it. I said, we have to immediately send a fax to the Rebbe. Have the Rebbe give you a bracha. I got back an answer, and I remember I almost fainted. I was shocked, I was scared, and I didn't understand it. I had written in that this man wants to become a partner with Chabad of the Valley. If he has blessing in this venture, he will give so much and so much, and I want the Rebbe's bracha. And we know that the Rebbe discussed such concepts. It's based in the Gemara. I'm giving tzedakah on this condition, so that this should happen and that should happen.
Wenn geht zu Tzedakah, sagt der Rebestor auf Chanuni no Bozeis. Auf al Pi, was Bichlal ist, soll sich nicht sein der Ingen von Eisprung dem Ebersten, mit dem Eisnamen, wie es wird auch gebracht in Schulchen Oruch, heilig jede Dehe, und Hilches Doki non-Heid, aber ne Gehe zu Doki, so demolte der Eberster nicht nur sie mag sein, die Pchino, no der Eberster bet sich up Chanuni, no bo sie ist bet am Sollem Eisprung.
The Rebbe's answer was the very antithesis. The Rebbe answered, Ha'im zehu haderech lahasnais mikoidem im Hashem yizbarech? Question mark. Is this the way to make prior stipulations with God? To make deals with God? And then Oscar Alexian immediately called Rabbi Reichik, the Shadar, who I know since a little kid. I told him, I'm alarmed. I think the Rebbe is possibly displeased. So Reichik said, what are you talking about? This is an amazing answer. The Rebbe wants that this certain Balabash should give the money first. In that way, things will materialize for him.
A früher schafft man zu die Geld und danach nimmt man auf sich die Mitzvot. Nur sehe ich da, als jeder Hofke, wie man das gesehen bei Muchisch, bei einer Bosse, beim Reben dem Schwer, sie gewinnen als Waffpelle bei Seicher, sie gewinnen da reingehen zum Reben, dem der Rebbe geheißen geben, auf der Bosse von Zemachzedek, als Schum Schelili für Erki klar. Na sie gewinnen, als Kabbawasilnik hat gleich gesagt, ja, und hat gesagt, bis Simchuf Tuvli Wov. Von zu sich in Stott, hat sich ihm gemacht am Mechire von der Schere, was dem Gewinn verlegt. Und es nicht gewinnt kein Esig. Aber er einmal können kaufen und kommen dich zurück in Stott und bekommen nach Kene. Für ein Mechir, Tev bei Jeser, wo der Mechir hat gesteilt, sei auf der Alkonen bezahlen, die Scheiwes, was er genommen beim Reben, dem Schwer und sind noch beim geblieben.
I'm in construction. Together with my brother, we established a custom, a minhag, that when we finished the job, and the job usually later used to be a year, sometimes a year and a half or 6 months, that at the end of the job, we used to bring money to the Rabbi and then tell him that we just finished a job, Baruch Hashem, and this is money of the Rabbi. We took a job, a big job, and it was a very difficult job. I told my brother, I said, you know what? Why don't we give in money now and ask for a bracha, tell him the Rebbe that in America there's a minhag that you can take out insurance. Lamafreya, you want to take out and make sure that, so let's give him the money and ask the Bela for a bracha that we should be successful. What, I have to wait until the end of the job? He said, you know, it's a good idea. Go ahead, do it. Now, I wasn't there, but B'yomen brought it in. And he says, that's from the Brit of Mizisman. As we say, he says, he said, like, they have, Rebbe had it always, on the spot, So B'yomen said, he says, label, this is bei Wort, sagt das eben, der Rebbe wird fragen, was sie jetzt gleich doch nicht geendigt das Job in 2 Wochen, 3 Wochen, a month. He told the Rebbe, as in America, the minhag, we can gain insurance on the free. And they took a job, but they found out the job is going very, very rough, very tough. So they asking the Rebbe for a bracha that the job shall be good. B'yomen tells me as follows. He says he heard it, and he started to smile. He says, "It's a gewaltige idea. Why do you have to wait for the end?" And not only to schitten mit brachas, he gave brachas. The Rebbe started helping as ein behatzlocher, and the problem was having the problem. They will not know the problems. And the end of the job, Baruch Hashem, we made parnasa, L'mayla Miderach.
Das eine Schiene, wo der Rebbe sagt, Maftiach, dass beschwil steht und wie bald das geht, on mit dieses Hagbol, geht sich der Rebbe echt sein mit jed, mit Birchosi shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, b'meyed shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, und demut wird nimmt sich der Daive Heser Milamaylo, המבקומדים רוויחה בכל עניוני האודום.
Wir sind ein Vierschritt von so einem Großgeschäft. Es ist scientific, laboratory, Instruments. Wir brauchen aber größere Sloffen, wir brauchen ein Einzel, so sich zu führen.
Der war, der leikt man, weil der Business verlieren Geld. Es ist noch ein Stück an ihnen, Gareve. Sie do Hefse in Geschäft.
Und der Fall sagt, ich beschloss, ich mäßig sein, mit Stocke zu beweisen, öffnen, ein neues Ziel, ein neues Weg, ein Nosse, dazu kommen noch mehr, dazu kommen auch Nosse, wir sagen, dass auch Nosse will sein, bleibt einfach mehr, wie sie gewinnt Business.
Oh Mann.
So that was a powerful, powerful video, which just adds on to everything we've said. We till now explained why mystically giving charity is the greatest mitzvah, how to elevate so much of your world. But if you study Chassidus and you study actually the Tanya, the whole section of Tanya of the Alter Rebbe's letters, he dedicates letters and letters about charity. Charity is such an important mitzvah in Judaism. And as you see here, it's the only mitzvah you're allowed to test God. But not only that, it shows sometimes you want to give the charity before. It opens up new channels of blessing, as you saw with the two stories over there. And unfortunately in the world, I don't even know how many people even give 10% of their income to charity. And 10% means 10%, okay? Not before taxes, after taxes, because what's taxed as money you didn't make. But you should figure out how much money you make, the 10% at the very least, okay? If we're reading here about blessings from charity, look at the 10%. Okay, most people that I know that have trouble giving even 10% is because they're worried about the amount of money that they have. They're like, I barely make a living. How can I give away 10%? And what you get from that video is realize the blessings that charity is going to give. And I think we can connect these two ideas. As we've studied in the chapter how great charity is, how much more it connects this world to God and fulfilling God's will. So if you're going to do something that gives God so much pleasure, he's going to reciprocate and give you something as well. That's why I think charity has this great blessing. Charity brings so much blessing in our lives because it is the mitzvah that brings the most godliness into the world. Therefore, God will reciprocate and give us the most blessings in our life. And so therefore, I urge you, at the very least, to try and up, if you haven't done it yet, not just generally. It says when it comes to tithing, it says in the Mishnah, one should not estimate their tithing. One should and I was talking about fruits, don't estimate. Look at the pile. That's about 10% of my fruits, right? You got to have an actual accounting. So know how much you make and write it down. Every time I deposit a check into my account, I have a note on my phone and I put 10% how much I owe. And sometimes I give charity. I've given more than I've gotten yet, and that's fine too. But it's a very easy thing. Every time you put money in your account, you do it that way. Now you might ask, what about investments and things like that? Obviously, those don't really count until the money really goes into your money. It's not. So let's say you have a retirement account. You don't have to give 10% on the retirement account. When you take disbursements and they come into your account, that's when you take 10%, right? But otherwise, you don't need to take 10% until it's really coming into your hands. But again, as you saw from the video, that charity has this wonderful power of giving blessings. And I think it's very much connected to what we read here, because charity is the quintessential mitzvah that really elevates the world and changes the divine energy in the world around you. So automatically, I think it would make sense. You'll get special blessings in your life when you give that 10% charity. And if a poor rabbi can give charity, everyone can give charity too. So with that, there's also, I just want to point out, one of the people speaking there, his name was Label Zisman. He was in the video. Label Zisman, he actually wrote a great book. He was a Holocaust survivor. He was in Auschwitz. I think it's called I Believe. It's a worth it read if you are into reading Holocaust books, like I am. And so you can look him up, Label Zisman. And I'm just looking up online right now. He wrote a book called I Believe. Let's see, Label Zisman. Yeah, I Believe, the story of one Jewish life. Zisman with one S. It's a very good book. Worth it. Very much worth it to read. He actually smuggled a pair of tefillin into Auschwitz, but so that's his book, I Believe. Okay. So we're gonna. So let us complete this section that we're discussing. And I paused the break with Charity because he's going to ask, so to speak, a side question. And his question is going to be like this: if we have now explained how great charity is, so then why do our sages also tell us that the study of Torah is equal to all the mitzvahs? In other words, if we just said charity is equal to all the mitzvahs, how is it that Torah study is also equal to all the mitzvahs? And the answer is going to be, it depends what we're looking at. In other words, there is something that Torah study does that no other mitzvah can do, but it's something that charity can do that no other mitzvah can do. So what is it that you think that Torah study can accomplish that is not accomplished by other mitzvahs, that is not accomplished by charity or other mitzvahs? What is special and unique about Torah study? And we have discussed these in previous chapters. Anybody remembers any thoughts? What makes Torah study special and unique as a mitzvah? Yes? Put in the chat. You can give guesses. It's fine.
Does that have to do with just like the knowledge of our ancestors and those stories?
Yeah. Knowledge to an extent. Yes. Okay.
Brings you closer to God.
Okay. What do you mean by that? I mean, every mitzvah brings you closer to God.
Well,
You're not wrong. I'm just want to develop it further.
hmm.
Does that have to do with customs? Like that's where we get our customs from too, traditions.
I mean, obviously, yeah, you need to study Torah in order to know what to do. What's
Rabbi?
unique about Torah? Yeah.
Yeah, Rabbi, I feel like the question's a little nebulous. It's a little general. I mean, there's like an infinite amount of benefit to studying the Torah, but you say as a mitzvah, you can go like several different directions on this. Maybe a little more context. A hint.
Got it. Great question. All right. Good. So what? Okay, we explained till now how charity can elevate so much of the world, and Torah study elevate that nothing else can. Right? So charity elevates the world around us in ways that no other mitzvah can. So what area does Torah elevate that not in a way that nothing else can? Yes.
So does it have to do with the animal soul versus the godly soul, that when we study Torah, it really elevates our godly soul, but when we give charity, it elevates both our godly and animal soul?
Good. Yes. Torah study elevates more of our godly soul. The mitzvahs elevate more, but for the most part, it's in our mind. So what area does Torah study elevate? It elevates the way we think. It elevates us, so to speak, right? So if charity elevates the world around us, which is expressed in the animal soul, Torah study elevates us, okay? It gets deep into us, right? As we said, Torah is the way God thinks. When you study Torah, you think the way God thinks. So in other words, the way we merge with God when we study Torah cannot be accomplished through other mitzvahs. In other words, when I do a mitzvah, I'm doing what God wants. But me, myself, I am not as merged with God as when I study Torah. When I study Torah, I'm actually merged with the way God thinks. I'm thinking the way God thinks. That's a beautiful thing. So Torah study can get deep into us and connect us with God in ways that cannot be accomplished with other mitzvahs. Whereas conversely, a mitzvah, and charity specifically, can elevate the world around us and our animal soul in ways that no other mitzvah can. So that's why we have these two great mitzvahs: Torah study and charity. So let's take a look inside the actual text. And I'm sharing that wrong screen, so let's close that. Did it make it so complicated? Okay, no, don't start. Over here, okay. So now it says like this. And I hope I'm sharing the screen. Yes, I am. Okay, so it says like this. And while our sages of blessed memory said that the study of Torah is equal to them all, to all of their mitzvahs put together, this poses no contradiction to all the above. Because the sages taught this about Torah study to point out a particular virtue, that Torah study is carried out with the thought and speech, which are the inner garments of the energizing soul. So what mitzvah is going to change the inner parts of you, the inner garments, thought and speech, right? And to the extent he says even the thought and speech of your animal soul, but not the action. The sages were suggesting the Torah study is equal to them all in terms of its ability to influence the inner garments. Practical mitzvahs, on the other hand, are most powerful at elevating the outer garment of action. The Tanya now suggests a second unique advantage to Torah study, which led the sages to declare it equals to them all. And another advantage of the mitzvah Torah study is that not only the inner garments, but even the klipat noga powers of chachma, bina, and dat in the deep core of the energizing animal soul. So again, remember we said there are the 10 powers of each soul plus the garments. So not only can you elevate the animal soul's garments of thought and speech if you say your Torah, but it can also elevate actually the 3 powers of intellect of the animal soul are actually absorbed in the realm of holiness when Torah study is carried on depth, engaging the mind. The notion that the deep core can be elevated to God seems to be a departure from Tanya's general emphasis that the Beinoni can't transform the deep core of the animal soul, which is why Dr. Yannick, who studied the Tanya till now, aptly said Torah study elevates the godly soul. How is he suddenly changing over here that Beinoni, their deep core emotional powers of chesed and gevurah and tiferes cannot be transformed to holiness, so those are its powers of emotions. That doesn't mean to say they can't transform their chokhmah, bina, and dat for Torah study. So in other words, he's making an argument here. Although you cannot elevate the emotions of your animal soul, you can elevate the intellect of the animal soul. Why? It's a fascinating idea. Because the negative energy is stronger in the emotional powers of chesed and gevurah and tiferes than in the intellectual powers of chachma, bina, and dat, which prevent the emotional powers from being elevated. In other words, the animalistic side of the animal soul is more animalistic in its emotions than it is in its mind. Why? Because as known to the Kabbalists, the emotional powers of Klippa are more successful in sucking energy from the realm of holiness. So when we stated above that the deep core of the animal, the Beinoni's animal soul, can't be elevated to God, that was largely true of the emotional faculties, but the intellectual faculties of the deep core can be transformed, and it happens during Torah study. That's another reason why Torah study is equal to them all, because it affects the deep core in a way that no other mitzvah does. Now, the third advantage of Torah study is kind of separate, so we're not going to discuss it this week. I want to end off on that second note, the advantage of Torah study that can elevate the deep core of your animal soul's intellectual powers, but not emotions. When we discussed the animal soul earlier, we described how the animal soul is primarily emotion-based, and it uses its mind only to get what it wants. In other words, whereas the animal soul starts in the mind and then stokes its emotions, right? So it starts in the mind, I know about God, I think about God, now I feel God. The animal soul usually really uses its mind as a means to get what it wants, right? So I want chocolate cake. Now I'm going to use my mind how to get it, okay? It's not that you contemplated and spent a lot of time thinking about chocolate cake to the point where you desired it. You can do it, but it's not usually how it works. Usually the mind, so to speak, knows about something and automatically you want it, okay? So that is why we can already, number one, appreciate why it's easier, so to speak, to an extent, change our animal soul's intellect versus its emotions, because the animal soul doesn't use its intellect in such a powerful way as it does its emotions. Second of all, the intellect of the animal soul, intellect always is more of an objective thing, though everyone is biased. Intellect in its essence is a more of an objective exercise, okay? And therefore, there's a more of a possibility to elevate the animal soul's mind than it is to elevate its heart. And so here we learned something new that we didn't before in the Tanya, that when we study Torah, not only can we elevate our godly soul, not only can we elevate the garments of the animal soul, there's something beautiful. We can even elevate the actual intellect of the animal soul. And that's a new thing he's throwing out here. And so therefore, my friends, though we spent a lot of day today describing the importance of giving charity and the great benefits that can be accomplished with charity, there are also great benefits through studying Torah. And therefore, that is why we have in life always these two sides: study Torah, do mitzvahs, study Torah, do mitzvahs. And it goes on ad infinitum because both are super, super, super important. And they can both accomplish things that cannot be accomplished otherwise. So I'm going to stop the recording. Thank you for coming. And we hope to see you tomorrow night for our masterclass on Rosh Hashanah.